do have a quorum present. And first item of business is the closed session.
Closed session. In accordance with Texas Government Code Subchapter D, 1, Section 551.072 Real Estate, Property Acquisition, 2, Section 551.087 Economic Development, Deliberation regarding economic development negotiations, and 3, Section 551.071 Consultation with Attorney pending litigation, Sage Natural Resources LLC versus City of Lewisville, Texas, Lewisville Summit LLC, and Huffine Communities, Inc., case number 20-2903-211, Denton County District Court.
Okay, we'll now go into closed session.
So, Mayor, are you ready?
Is that right?
Here we go.
Hey, Donna, are you there?
Yes, sir. Are you ready for us to
Yes.
proceed?
We're ready.
Okay. So, Mayor and Council, before we have our mid-year report, which is certainly a very different mid-year report than what you've seen in the past. We've had some of these, but it's been a while. So this is one where we are looking at the impacts to our revenue caused by the COVID-19 situation. We have already put a lot of steps in place, positions on hold, projects frozen. So Gina's going to walk you through the impacts that has had, certainly on the expenditure side, and then she's going to be comparing that to what we're projecting on the revenue side. Embedded within this presentation are a couple of other issues. One is special events. So when you look at the Hotel-Motel fund, that particular fund is being significantly impacted. And so the question that we're going to bring before you tonight is, do you want us to try to have a Western Days event? James is going to walk you through some of that, whether you want to have a 2-day event, a 1-day event, or no event. So Gina will start her presentation talking about the various revenues. When we get to special events, we'll turn it over to James. In addition to that, Melinda's going to talk to you about a proposal we have that's also on your agenda for consideration, and that's a retirement incentive program. And so she's going to spend some time walking through with you how this program would work. And certainly our desire is that we not have to furlough or lay off employees. If we can incentivize employees to voluntarily leave, then that certainly positions us in case we need further and deeper cuts. So Melinda's going to walk you through that. There's also questions. We've had some requests related from the hoteliers about whether or not we should collect or not collect Hotel-Motel within a certain time frame. We're going to walk you through a survey, and I'll certainly give you my recommendation on that. So this is a little different. She's going to be walking you through the mid-year analysis, and we'll switch gears a couple of times to talk about some of these special type topics. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gina and let her start walking you through mid-year.
Okay, so as Ms. Barron told you, I will start talking about revenues first, and then I'll go into expenditures. So starting with revenues, citywide for mid-year, we are looking at a revenue impact of approximately a $15 million loss, and that's throughout all of our funds. The major losses that we're seeing are in sales tax, fines and warrants, recreation, hotel occupancy tax, interest earnings, mixed beverage, and property tax. I have utility fund on there because it's somewhat of an unknown still, but we are analyzing it, and right now it's not as impactful as some of the other funds, but I wanted to leave it on there as a reminder that we are going to talk about it. In the general fund alone, that decrease is projected right now to be $10.2 million by the end of the fiscal year. That's with a gulp. We've never had any type of loss like this in my over 20 years of doing budgeting for cities. I've never seen anything like this, so it's somewhat unsettling, to say the least. The majority of that loss in revenue we're projecting to be from sales tax, where we're showing a $6.5 million reduction in what we normally would anticipate to receive this fiscal year. And I'm going to go over that in a great deal of detail in just one second. First, I wanted to talk about the other sources of revenue that we're also projecting to see decreases in. One of the major ones is fines and warrants. Fines and warrants, we're projecting to be down $1.3 million. This was actually a decrease that we were experiencing prior to COVID-19. We actually had a trend down. We had some turnover in the PD department, some extended vacancies there that really hit us a little bit more. But now that COVID is in place, we're actually not running any of our grant programs. We're not doing the school zone enforcement because there are no schools in session right now. So that, I don't think we're going to see an increase in those revenues back to kind of more stabilized until we get full staff and also until this pandemic is kind of over.
And as always, Council, with this particular revenue, it gets very, very impacted by who's in the position. If you remember, under state law, we cannot direct police officers to write tickets, and we don't do that. And so if we have a vacancy or turnover, that can significantly affect the revenue coming in from fines. And warrants, we're not even collecting warrants right now. So it's just another loss.
Yeah, and we do have a lot more information on that in the backup memo for the agenda item that we have later on in the agenda. And so if you want more information on that, I can certainly get it for you. Also, Judge Holman and Chief Deaver were both very available to answer any questions that we have on that. So just let me know if you need anything more on that. Thrive revenue, this is the loss in revenue that we budgeted for the fiscal year. We won't be opening Thrive this year, and as you know, Stacy and her crew were just getting busy on marketing Thrive when all of this hit. So we've actually collected $41,000 of the $770,000 that we had budgeted for Thrive, and we do not anticipate getting any more the rest of the year. Parks, recreation, other than Thrive, we're looking at a $589,000 decrease. What we do is trend parks. Most of that revenue comes in the second half of the year in the summer months, and so at this point in the year, we really never know what's going to happen with the summer months. The lake levels could be high or low, and that can really affect our park entrance fees and Lake Park and Marina and all of that. However, normally we will trend it based on the last few years and what we've been able to do. So this year we've only looked at 25% of that trend, and assuming that we will be open for a portion of that, but not at all for the entire time. So property tax, this $445,000 and the mixed beverage tax both could be a little bit more conservative than the others, I think. Property tax, we've collected 98%. Normally, we will collect the remainder of this amount over the next 6 months and get it by the end of the year. This year, I just wasn't so sure. With unemployment rates higher and the way the economy looks right now, I didn't want to count on us collecting that when we haven't gotten it so far this fiscal year. Mixed beverage tax is another one that is wholly dependent on mixed beverage sales in bars. And because those have been closed and will be closed, and we don't know what the new levels of occupancy in those bars will be and how long that will take, we've assumed a very healthy decrease there. This is really a majority of what we've already collected so far this fiscal year. Interest earnings are down to 75 basis points. So less than 1%, and we've applied that in not just general fund, but throughout all our funds. So you'll see that type of a decrease. This is the general fund only, but you'll see similar increases in the decreases in the other funds. Ambulance fees, I put on here at $110,000 decrease. They are actually, our calls for service are down just slightly in March and April. So really they're on trend to make their ambulance fee projection. But again, because of the unemployment rates, I'm a little bit leery that we'll start getting some more unpaid accounts. And so we did do a drop of 5% for that possibility. The credit card convenience fees have nothing to do with COVID. If you'll remember, a couple of council meetings ago, we did away with the credit card convenience fees, and this is just the accounting transaction to reflect that in our budget. Library fines we've reduced because the library is closed, and how it will reopen and when, we're not as sure on the library fines, so we've decreased that quite a bit. We've reversed the transfer in from the court security fund that helps us pay for a warrant officer, because that fund is wholly driven by fines and warrants, and since those are down, the revenue into that fund is down, and they cannot support that transfer over to the general fund this year. The mixed beverage permit processing fee. Again, there's not a lot of people out there probably right now who want to get into the mixed beverage business, and so we've decreased that. And then we had a little bit of good news there that we actually had $114,000 in revenue sources that have actually already came in over our budget projections for the fiscal year. So now I want to really talk about sales tax. Sales tax is our main 1/3 of our general fund budget. We've decreased it down $6.5 million. I wanted to walk you through a couple of the methods that we use to determine the projected loss. The first thing that we did is we actually have 11,152 different sales tax payers in the city. 607 of those pay us more than $10,000 a year. So the majority by far pay less than $10,000 a year. But those that paid us over $10,000 a year, we literally went through line by line and business by business and put them into different categories depending on if they were closed and we knew that they were closed, if they were a restaurant that was continuing drive-through services, businesses that will be impacted as unemployment rates increase. And those could be things like a flooring store, where right now their business is okay. When they were open, they were okay. But then as unemployment rates increase, people may not be as likely to change out their flooring or do those added extra things. Businesses that will not be impacted, and those are really like our electric, our utility companies pay us a great deal of sales tax. Walmart and Sam's, and then actually Walmart may even be in the category where they see an increase at the rest of the fiscal year. And we did a slight one there, even though they are well up in volume of sales. So we've put them all into there. All the businesses that paid under $10,000 were reduced by 62.5% for the remainder of the year. We got that 62.5% by decreasing their payments by 50% in March, 100% April, 100% May, 50% June, 50% July, 25% August, and 0% in September. And those, I think, kind of show you how we think this will trend. We're not really sure. We aren't mind readers, or I wish we could exactly know what was going to happen, but that's our best projection for now. And that resulted in an estimate of $24.2 million. The second analysis we did was 100% different. It was a totally different way to look at it. We all know that there's a logical nexus between unemployment and sales tax collections, because when you're unemployed, you're not likely to have as much disposable income to be spending on sales tax items. And so although we knew that was logical, we've never really looked at it in terms of how do we correlate our sales tax collections with our unemployment rates. We started looking at Denton County unemployment rates, the state of Texas unemployment rates, and we've now gone on to look at the U.S. unemployment rate. What we learned was there is a really high correlation between the unemployment rate. As it increases, sales tax collections decrease. Our analysis went back 10 years here to 2010. Since this time, we've actually gone back to 1977 on analysis and correlations, and we've really learned that the higher correlation is in the last 10 years. So I think that's a good model for us, is to only go back that far to see how tightly it correlates. Using this model and assuming a 9% unemployment rate average, so that could mean it could be 11 or 12 this month and 11 or 12 next month, or even the next, and then down some for the following. But this is assuming a 9%. It results in an in an estimate of 24.1. On the chart, you'll see that the slope there shows you that for every 1% the unemployment rate increases, our sales tax decreases $1.8 million. So that was what was really interesting, I thought was fascinating about it, was that those two rates were almost similar. The results were so similar. So you can go ahead. So what that tells me is if we take our $30.7 million we budgeted to start with, we have a new projection based on a hybrid of those two methods, just doing them 50-50, adding them together, dividing by 2, you get a projection of $24.2 million, which is your loss of $6.5 million. And this equates to a 21% decrease for the entire year. And you're going to see that similar decrease in 4B, crime control, and fire control. I did want you to know that those weren't the only two methods. We have been doing everything we can to figure this out, I think, as every other city and governmental entity in the world has. We've looked at articles related to other cities, and they tend to vary a great deal what they're doing. We went back and looked at the Great Recession effects in 2008, and I will tell you that was a 9.79 decrease. That would be a $3 million hit to us, and I would have taken that any day. So it determined to be not quite as conservative as we wanted to be. We also consulted with Dr. Robert Bland, who's a UNT professor in the Master of Public Administration program. He specializes in budgeting and, in fact, has written numerous books on public government, especially local government. So we felt really good when he had looked through it and kind of looked over our analysis and felt comfortable with it. In addition, there is a company that we don't actually contract with, but that has put out a lot of information recently and has done some work with Jason Moore in our ED department before. And they've given us some estimates which vary, letting us know that sales tax collections really vary by industry. As we know, the general retail and restaurants and entertainment are by far the hardest hit. But we have seen growth in retail and grocery stores as well as pharmacy. So that was good to point out. And also they show their sales tax declining as just 12% in May, 18% in June, 21% for the third quarter of the fiscal year, and 18% in the fourth quarter. And as you know, our projection is a little bit more conservative than that, but that gave me a good feeling that maybe towards the end of the year, if their projection holds through, we may be able to reinstitute some of the delays we've put in. And lastly, I just wanted to let you know that it's not just me and Deanne working on this. We have our whole city's resources working on this. Community relations reviews and forwards me articles on the economy, unemployment rates, what other cities are doing. Economic development helps by updating our analysis by going one-on-one on those businesses to see if they're open or closed or what's going on with them. And then, of course, ITS helps us with the analytical tools and the databases. So we have the whole gamut working on this. So that was the biggest sales tax loss, is the biggest impact. But the second biggest and even greater for the fund is the Hotel-Motel tax fund. We are projecting a loss of almost $1 million at $919,000. This is based on Hotel-Motel occupancy projections. In a normal year, we would average about a 70% collection. 70% occupancy. Our March occupancy was 44%. Community relations staff are monitoring hotel stays and giving us all the latest information available. This chart shows you kind of like our sales tax analysts that are working outside the city on this. Smith Travel Research actually analyzes hotel industries. And this analysis was actually from March 21st, but they do it every year, and every year it tended to get worse. I think this year this week we may have seen a little bit of a light at the end of that tunnel. But what they recommend is an average decrease of 50% for the remainder of the fiscal year. We utilized a decrease of 54% when we first started doing it, and we've kept with that. So we're within the range that they are recommending. This chart shows you all of the March occupancies. I won't go at hotel by hotel, but you can see that the extended stay hotels tend to be the higher still occupancy, and I'm assuming that's because more people either live there or have a long-term arrangement to stay there.
So, Council, we did receive 2 requests from hotel properties to defer the collection of the Hotel-Motel tax. So I asked our finance director to do some research, and he called all of our 17 survey cities. He got no response from 6 because, honestly, I think they're in the same situation we are, trying to decide what to do. 6 of them did say they would not defer any payments, and 5 are deferring payments. Now, the state is actually also deferring payments for 90 days. And those that these other cities are normally matching what the comptroller's office is doing. My recommendation to you, we have been receiving payments from 25 out of our 27 properties have made their March payment. At this point in time, I'm not going to recommend to you that you defer those payments. Remember, that tax is paid as a hotel tax that is to come to the city. It is never meant for the operations of the hotel. And so for this reason, I would recommend that the council go on and collect that money. If we start seeing significant problems, we could come back, but I think that we're safely in the majority of cities to do that. And council, if you'd like, we can stop here and I can see if there's any conversation that you'd like to have on that topic.
Okay, are there any questions?
No question, just a comment. I'm 100% in agreement. It's a tax that should be collected now. If this is what I agree, I'm in agreement.
I had a quick question, or a clarification. That tax is collected whenever somebody pays their bill, right? When they check out.
Yes, ma'am. That's exactly how it works. It's 7% tax. It's paid when they check out on each day.
So really the only reason to defer those payments is to give them a little extra operating capital,
Yes,
which is not what that money is for.
That is correct, and that's my exact concern.
Okay. Well, in that case, I am in complete agreement against the deferral.
Okay.
Same here.
Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you, Council.
Okay, so I'll go through the last couple of revenue slides before we get to the expenditures. Utility fund, water sales, as I mentioned before, they remain in line with what we budgeted at the beginning of the year. We did do an analysis of our top 50 users. We had finance review it, public services, and economic development. And although some of our major users were shut down for a portion of the time, budget suites also had a meter issue that is now being corrected, and their use has decreased substantially. Those items in and of themselves were not enough to lessen the overall increase in consumption throughout the city so far this fiscal year. And in fact, our April billing was higher this April than any billing in the prior 4 years.
This is one, as Gina shared this information with me, I keep going, are you sure? It's really surprising to me. But I think a lot of people are at home, they're doing projects, and so they're driving up their water use.
Yeah, and one thing I talked with Donna about was the fact that we have a lot of apartment complexes, and this is one time when that is actually a big water, majority of our top 50 have apartment complexes. And so that explains why we may be seeing more of an increase in water than some other cities may be seeing. In addition, less than 4% of our accounts are in a delinquent cutoff status situation, so it is anticipated they will be paid at some point, probably this fiscal year, and if not, at least within 60 days of the close of the fiscal year, and it could be attributed back to this fiscal year. But even if they were all remaining unpaid at approximately $160,000, the revenue that we see in excess right now will still cover that shortage. So as always, we're going to continue to monitor water sales. It's always driven by weather. If we get a lot of hot days, it's going to go up. If we get a lot of rain, it's going to go down. So we'll continue to look at that source. Capital recovery fees is another one. We've spent a lot of time going through. Our neighborhood services group has gone back through what we originally projected at budget, construction project by construction project. Their review shows that everything in the pipeline, they've marked off some, they've added some, but they're actually thinking we'll increase our capital recovery fees by the end of the year. We've already collected 73%, and so I'm going to leave that flat and not increase it, although we may see an increase in that. Water samples are down 10,000 because we have stopped doing some samples for a few entities that we did prior to COVID in an effort to reduce that person-to-person contact. Reconnect fees are going to be down because we aren't doing disconnects, so we're not going to have a reconnect. And then, of course, interest fees, like interest earnings, as we said before. So in response to all of those revenues, we do have a directive in place that our city manager approved a few months back now. It's been about 2 months. And I'll go through these one by one, but basically we start over in the right corner with one-time funding. We're looking at that. We're looking at position vacancies, commodities, contracts, purchase orders, service levels to see what we can lower, facilities that we might could close, any transfers that we have going out of the general fund that we want to try and reduce. And last but not least, we'll look at reductions in staffing costs if we get to that point. So one-time funding includes the reduction in funding for CIP projects as well as any one-time capital. Our position vacancies, currently all position vacancies are placed on hold for review by our city manager prior to posting. I think right now we have 59 vacancies. Our commodities and contracts, all of these are reviewed by finance in our office prior to expending or encumbering funds. So everything over $2,500 right now, it goes through our office, and we review it to see if it's something we can stop. Purchase orders, we're reviewing all of those to see what's open and could be closed because this can increase our fund balance. Service levels, departments are reviewing service levels to see where reductions can be made. An example would be Leela, Lake Park, Utility Fund, the lab services, as I talked about earlier. Facilities, looking to see where we can shut down or save utility operating costs as we did in the library, MCL Grand, et cetera. Internal transfers out, these are transfers to other funds like the transfers that we make to our health fund or the insurance fund, the maintenance and replacement fund. We'll look and see what we can reduce there without impacting those internal services funds. And then lastly are the reduction in staffing costs. These can be the retirement incentive program that Melinda will discuss with you in a little bit, as well as reduced benefits, furloughs, any kind of reduction in force. Did you want to talk about
Reduction in force? Yes, later.
no, per project?
Oh, okay. So council, on this list, you have all of the projects that we have put on hold to date, and I'll just kind of quickly go through these. We've included in parentheses the fund that it would impact. So certainly Thrive and the Thrive Nature Park opening is delayed. The Vic parking lot, you'll remember we bought that building, old chamber building that is over there off of Main Street. James was about to move forward on that parking lot design, but because of COVID, we put that project on hold. Housing study, we actually did an RFP. It went out on the street. It came back in really over our budgeted amount anyway, but at this point, I have put that project on hold. Prairie Creek Environmental Assessment, we have given you a report on this. At this point in time, that would be some plantings and removal of plants that aren't natural to the area were our next steps, but we put that on hold. Fire Department Station 5 workout space, that particular station's never had workout space, and we wanted to add it. And that money actually came from savings from our original project when we built Station 3 and 8, so we'd like to get back to that, but we put it on hold for now. Annex design and renovation, again, we've talked to you about that for a couple of years. We were ready to move. I put that on hold. Vista Ridge Lift Station, that project's delayed. Roof restorations, as you know, we've made a lot of investment in our infrastructure over the last several years. We have several more roofs we'd like to replace, but that's on hold. Library operations have been temporarily closed. That actually changed. I'll talk about that in my report later as of this week. But we'll talk about that in more detail here in a minute. Leela operations, we temporarily opened them, but now we've reopened them based on the governor's direction related to state parks. Lake Park operations were closed really not so much because of COVID, but because of flooding. We have reopened now at this point in time. Old Town Aquatic Facility, we do not plan to open this summer. So that is the smaller of the aquatic parks. And so we're hoping that we're going to be able to open our facility on College Street, but at this point in time, not College, Valley Parkway. So we are hoping that we'll be able to open it, but until the governor gives us some more guidance there, I'm not going to say what the timing of that will be. Old Town Audio System, put that project on hold. Facade Improvement Program has been really very beneficial to redevelopment of Old Town, but we've had to put that on hold. All of our neighborhood program, the PEP, the Love Your Block, all of those really great programs that have been so beneficial to enhancing our neighborhoods, Unfortunately, we put that on hold. T-shed covered parking, that was something that Keith had required, so we had more protection of our equipment at the Public Services Building. That's on hold. Neighborhood Bold Initiative and Empowerment Zones, those actually came out of council pitches. Great programs, but those together was about $200,000, so we put that on hold. Castle Hill Storm Sewer Analysis, put that on hold. Land acquisitions, you gave us money for that in case there were land that we were interested in purchasing. That's about $500,000. That's been put on hold. And then certainly every year over the last, a number of years, we've tried to increase our capital improvement program. We've been able to do that consistently, but now you're going to see us reducing that, and Gina will talk about that in a little bit more detail. Council, is there any questions on any of the items on this list? Good news. Okay, Gina.
Okay, so now I will go through kind of the expenditure savings, what we're doing to reflect the loss in revenue. On the general fund side, we've been able to come up with $8,194,290. So the salary savings I mentioned earlier from the position vacancies is equating to about $1.5 million by the end of the year. We've returned a portion of the street and drainage CIP ongoing funding, which, if you'll remember, is about $5.5 million annually. So we've returned $1.4 to the general fund to help make up. There may be a little bit more that we can do, but we're trying to keep that in there as long as we can.
Plus, Keith started most of the project.
He's done a lot, yeah. So there's not a whole lot more we can take. Departmental line item savings due to holding commodity and contractual services, that's $1.1 million. Delaying opening of Thrive, $800,000. Delaying the annex renovation, $800,000. Utilizing the SAFER grant, that was not something we budgeted in the general fund or the fire services fund. We budgeted that to go into the maintenance and replacement fund to pay back a apparatus purchase that we did last year. However, that fund doesn't need that money as much as the general fund and the fire services fund this year, so we're lucky that we have that funding to help offset some of those expenses. We're delaying the phase 3 of the traffic study. That will be one that we'll try and get back in as soon as we can. We're delaying, as Donna mentioned, the land acquisitions. That was $500,000 that was budgeted this fiscal year. We actually were so proud that we put in money to start setting aside building infrastructure funding this last fiscal year during the budget. We were super excited about that. If you'll remember, it was the roofing and this, so we had about $1.1 million for that set aside. Well, we've returned all the roofing, and now we have to return all the $200,000, and we'll hopefully get to put that back in the budget as soon as we can. Our training and travel has all been frozen except when essential for the job function, and that should save us $127,000. The neighborhood services projects, as Donna mentioned, the PEP and the Love Your Block, those have all been returned to the general fund to help us there, the Bold Initiative and then neighborhood empowerment zones, as well as facade improvement funding here in the general fund of $95,000, as well as the $200,000 in the Hotel-Motel fund. So what this chart shows you, or this slide, is that we are recommending that we utilize a portion of the fund balance, and that's something I don't think I ever thought I would say for operations, but this isn't exactly the reason that we have an operating reserve set aside. But let me walk you through the fund balance calculation. When we did our budget this year, we thought our beginning fund balance was going to be $32.5 million. It actually ended up being $36.7 million because we had higher revenues than we projected and we had lower expenditures than we projected. So that actually resulted in a growth in fund balance of over $4 million. That was good news. So our actual fund balance equates to 38% of operating reserves. Council, you've adopted an operating reserve of 20% in the general fund, so we're well above that. We also have a current metric out there that if you'll look on our dashboard, the current metric out there all the time right now, it's showing 150 days of operations. So that's something for you to kind of equate whenever you hear other cities say what number of days that they have being able to operate without any new revenue. So the amount needed to budget this balance the budget after all of the other budget reductions was $2 million. What's fortunate this year is that we didn't budget all of the revenue to be expended this fiscal year when we did the operating budget. We actually had a balance there of $1.4 million. So you can take that $2 million, subtract out the 1.4, and you actually have a use of $638,000 out of fund balance. We did appropriate purchase order carryovers earlier this fiscal year for $550,000. So we're really looking at, by the end of the year, $1.1 million or so out of fund balance, which will still allow for growth in the fund balance of almost $3 million. So just going back to that, I think that the fund balance use is something that is very a cautious way to look at it. It enables us to utilize fund balance a little bit this year, but then it really provides us the flexibility to utilize it next budget year if we really need to in a grander scale. And we don't know what's coming next year. We don't know what sales tax is going to do between here and then. We don't know what property tax revenues are going to look like. So really letting us have that flexibility in next fiscal year, I think, is more important than trying to use any more of that fund balance this year.
So, Council, let's stop there a minute, and I want to see if you have any questions.
Are there any questions?
Okay.
Okay, so we did look at three-level sensitivity analysis. One of those is a best, worst, and mid-case. Our budget projections are utilizing the mid-year kind of most likely scenario. We do have a worst-case scenario that would be an additional, and it could be worse than worse. I can't really say a worst case, but for our projections, we're saying this would be a worst case, an additional 5.6 decrease for the general fund. If that were to occur, this would require more drastic measures, such as benefit decreases for existing personnel, closing facilities for the remainder of the year, full-time position furloughs, even wage decreases or reductions in force. Those are all very drastic and more not as palatable reductions, but would be needed.
So, Council, when you look at it this way, we're getting fairly close to we're halfway through the fiscal year, and we're not going to really know where we are probably with any confidence till around July, because that's when we're going to have a better feel for how sales tax is coming in. So we're not going to have very long. If we do find this worst case scenario is occurring, we're not going to have a lot of cuts left to do. So that's probably where I lose sleep at night. Now, we're better off in a lot of cities because of fund balance. So we can dig more into fund balance. It's not something I want to do, but as Gina showed you, we had a growth in fund balance of over $4 million. But you can see that we didn't want to depend on that we dug in and we looked at everything we could possibly cut or freeze, and just in case that worst case scenario happens, because we will have very little time to respond when we truly know some of the ramifications.
On the flip side, on the best case scenario, is that we get an increase of 5.8, and maybe that we don't see that entire $6.5 million that we think we're going to lose. So if that's the case, that would allow a lot of these projects that have put on hold to be implemented. At this point, we would not recommend putting ongoing costs back into the budget until we know the effect on property tax in late July for the upcoming budget year. We don't want to put them back in right now, only to have to cut them once we know what's going on with property tax next fiscal year. So the $919,000 revenue loss in the Hotel-Motel fund, we've mitigated that throughout the fund. The tourism activity, MCL grants, special events, which James will talk with you about in a minute, reduced our transfers to the internal services like the health and the insurance I talked about earlier, salary savings, and then we had a little bit of ongoing operating costs with the Old Town audio system. So all of those resulted in an anticipated use of fund balance of $365,000. However, we do have $250,000 in fund balance that we had funded out of fund balance for the Facade grants that we're eliminating, so that will help rebuild that fund balance. So really, we're only looking at about $115,000 out of the fund balance this year. And modifying Western days could also decrease that.
The fund balance for Hotel-Motel
is right at $5 million.
So we have a very healthy fund balance.
We do.
So with that, James, would you take it over and talk a little bit about specific cuts and potential cuts?
Yes, I can do that. Just a quick note to add to what Gina was saying regarding our hotel occupancy. We haven't received all the official reports for April, but staff's been talking to the hotels multiple times a week. And so we know from what we've got on the April report so far, most of our properties have seen a significant drop from March to April. Makes sense because the first week or so of March, they were under regular operations, and then it started to drop. We have 4 of our key properties that during the month of April were below 10%. So April, very much a dead zone for most of the hotels. Extended stays are doing fine. On the other hand, one little bit of good news we got this afternoon, in March, the Country Inn and Suites closed temporarily. Just decided there was not enough business, they shut down. They have 2 properties, Country and Comfort. And they closed Country with no plan of when they would reopen. We weren't sure if they would. They told us today they're going to reopen tomorrow. They feel like that Comfort has done pretty well. It actually went up from March to April. So they think they've got an opportunity to get some revenue stream. So good news. We'll take any good news we can get, frankly, at this point. So as we look at events, just a reminder for council that most of our special events funding comes from the Hotel-Motel Fund. That's why we're talking about it here. We have about $1.1 million total for our special events, our festivals and our concerts, and $770,000 of that comes from the Hotel Fund. You'll remember Gina mentioned that our projected shortfall in revenue is somewhere north of $900,000. So even if we completely eliminated all special events, we'd still be short. So 770, some of that's already been spent. We'll get to that in the next slide. The 343 in the activities fund, remember that comes from sponsorship money and event revenue. So we only spend it if we get it. Almost all of that is Western days. In fact, all of that is Western days, and that is for the consultant contract and for all of our main stage entertainment. Overall, that $1 million funds 12 different events that cover 23 dates, and I'll tell you, there's very few cities in North Texas that put that number of events on with that level of resource. So we're proud of that. We're just not going to be able to save all of them. So looking at this year's calendar, we've already held 4 events. The October Concert Series, Best Little Brew Fest, which we are a sponsor of. We give them money, but someone else runs it, Cloud9 Charities. The Fall Food and Fashion Fest, and the Old Town Holiday Stroll. Those are done. We had some savings in some of those, which have helped as we move forward. We've already spent a lot of that money. 3 events were scheduled for the spring and were either postponed or canceled. St. Patty's Texas Style usually kicks off our spring event season in March. That originally got moved to May. We now anticipate canceling that. Colorpalooza was in April. We were going to try and keep some of the activities late in the summer or early fall, but it was not held in April. And KTA Jam Session in May was a complete cancellation. That's one you just can't pick back up another time of the year. So looking at the calendar, there's 4 events left on the schedule. The Fiesta Chara, the end of May. The Sounds of Louisville Concert Series on Tuesday nights in June and July. The Red, White, and Louisville Fireworks Show in July. You'll notice there, we hit the general fund for the fireworks because the state of Texas said fireworks is not an eligible hotel fund expense. And then a portion of the activities for that actually fall in the Sounds of Louisville concert budget. And then Western Days, which is $344,000 from hotel fund, $343,000 from the activities fund, and a small amount out of the risk fund to cover the rain insurance for the main stage. So again, looking at nearly $1 million shortfall, cannot make it all up here, but we do anticipate having a similar decline next year. So as we look at what's left in the hot budget, the hotel fund budget for this fiscal year is a little less than $600,000 in event money, and we're proposing to cut quite a bit of that. Go on to the next one. First off, we do recommend eliminating all the events up through Western Days. That means the ones we've held that we had hoped to reschedule would not reschedule. That's St. Patty's and Colorpalooza. It means we would not hold Fiesta Chara, we would not hold Sounds of Louisville or Red, White, and Louisville. That results in about $200,000 in savings. And then for Western Days, right now we propose that to be our return to the festival field, but with some potential changes to cut the budget on that since that is a $700,000 event. So we have some phases for you, and I apologize for the small print, but unfortunately you have big numbers on a slide. You have small print to get them all in. And our first is level one. These are just selected reductions. These are just trimming some of the activities that we've added over the past few years. For example, scaling back the main stage headliners. Remember, headliners come out of the activities fund, not the hotel fund, but we put it on this slide because it's all one event package for us. You need to know that we've already signed our 2 lead-in headliners, one for Friday, one for Saturday, and we have an offer out to one of our headliners, our big headliner for the event. The offer is out. They have another week to decide whether to take it or not. We already know if they come back and want more money, we're not going to do it. But if they come back and take the offer we already made in good faith, we would feel like that is a commitment. But we could eliminate the second headliner and replace that spot with a more of a regional or typical midday band. Maybe lowers the crowd a little bit, which might affect your alcohol sales and revenue numbers, but it have a bigger savings than an expense, we think, or savings on the expense than it would reduction of revenue. So you could do 47,000 saving there. Could be a little bit more, depends on how the bands fall, but that's our best estimate right now. And the rest you'll see are incremental. If we scale back the, used to be the Witherspoon stage, now it's the Bent stage down there on Charles Street. You could trim a little bit on that. You could reduce the amount that we spend on rentals for tables, tents, and chairs. Council might recall last year we moved all the tent rental for Western Days we started renting all the tents instead of having parks set up our tents because they already are doing so much. And it just is a big burden on them to go out there and do it. This might put a little bit of burden back on them if we trimmed some of that. Eliminate the cooking demonstration, eliminate the branding giveaway items. Last year that was the boot-shaped koozies. And eliminate our television advertising buy. That's almost $10,000. We were debating those last 2 items anyway to reallocate that. We just, in this case, would not reallocate it. We can go a little bit deeper. And some of these you start seeing some painful cuts because these are things that people really like to have. One is to cut the Native American dancers. It's not a big savings, but it is a savings. Another is to scale back the children's attractions. This would be getting rid of the Boogie Woogie Choo-Choo Train and the Roller Roper for about a $3,000 savings, $2,900. One is to eliminate the AV package for the hospitality suite. It's a very small expense, but if you're cutting expenses, you kind of need to trim some luxury items also. So having the video screens and audio piped in from the main stage into the hospitality suite might be something that we trim for at least a year. And then eliminating the exterior decor. We put out wooden fences and hay bales and things like that to make it look more Western in Old Town during the festival. You could eliminate that and it maybe takes a little flavor away, but the event itself doesn't suffer terribly. It's a $6,000 savings. Then you get to the severe reductions. This is the ones that people would notice and honestly people wouldn't like, but I think they'd understand. Hope they would. One is to suspend the parade, and that means it says Longhorn head. I typed that wrong. It should be Longhorn herd. It's not just the head, it's the whole animal. So our 24 Longhorns would stay in Oklahoma, which is the biggest part. That's the $10,000 we budgeted to bring them down. And if you don't have the Longhorn herd, then the Cattle Drive Parade kind of loses its flavor. So we would suspend that for a year and see what we could do for next year's budget. Next is eliminating the pony rides from the children. So this is another interactive item. And I will tell you the reason we chose these 3, the train, the roller roper, and the pony rides, these have the slowest turnover of participants. So it takes a long time to run 100 kids through the pony rides, but through a bounce house, you can throw half of them in at once. They're just bouncing around. They don't seem to care. Pony rides, you're limited to 6 to 8 ponies at a time. So we picked the ones that, what they say in Disney terms is a limited queue. So we eliminated those 3 potentially. Next is reducing the festival footprint. We already talked in stage 1 about scaling back the entertainment on the Bent stage. This would actually eliminate the Bent stage completely, eliminate the MDA barbecue cook-off, which is done in conjunction with our firefighter association. And that'd be about a $22,000 additional. Keep in mind, each of these levels is cumulative. So if you do level 3, you're also doing 1 and 2. So they're cumulative savings. This would do another $22,500 in savings, and maybe a little bit more because you shorten the fence line, and we just haven't done that number. So it'd probably be a few $1,000s more on shortening the fence. Go back to the footprint we had 3 years ago before we tried to include the distillery in the festival zone. The possibility of suspending the tamale competition for a year. $4,500 is half of our money we pay to Major League Eating. We've already paid them half on a deposit. They said they would just carry that over to the next year. So we would save half of our money on that. Everything else on that event is sponsored. And then completely eliminate tent rentals, that's another $2,500 in savings, but that also does put a burden on parks. We need to be aware that puts workload on one of those departments. So here's the maybe more drastic measures. If the little trims here and there aren't enough, we could go to just a one-day event. That would save about $172,000, some from the hot fund, probably about a third of that or a fourth of that from the activities fund. We would just go Saturday and have a one-day event like we did up until about 5 years ago, and then see if we can bring it back to 2 days next year. Surprisingly, going from 2 days to 1 day doesn't have huge savings, doesn't cut your budget in half. You can see your budget is still 523 out of 700,000. So you're saving about a fourth of the budget by cutting 1 day. And the last one is just, throw in the towel and say, for this year, the shortfall in the revenue is too much, and the uncertainty about when we can have crowds together for a party again is too much, and just decide we're not going to have an event in 2020, just like all the summer events, and we'll come roaring back hopefully in 2021. And that would save you the entire $700,000 event budget, half activities fund, half hotel fund.
James, tell council when they would have to make this decision, because he's having to book people, the events and such. If they didn't want to make that decision tonight, how much longer can we give them before you need to start booking?
Well, looking at what we've already booked in entertainment, there's really only one slot that would be kind of debatable at that point. We could comfortably wait till the end of May. We could conceivably wait till the middle of June, but you'll pass the middle of June and you start having to make deposits that are in some cases not some money we can get back. So end of May is our best target, and if we really need to drag our feet, then the first meeting in June.
So council, with that, I'd like to have some direction from you on what you want to do with Western Days. We can wait, we can bring this back in June, first meeting in June, or the last meeting in May, as James has suggested. But I read in the Sunday paper that they're thinking of not holding the state fair. So the State Fair of Texas is on the chopping block at this point in time. So remember, it starts the weekend of Western Days. So we're all looking to the future. Even if all of the limitations have been lifted, people certainly are still very leery about being out in large crowds. Now, I think we have a very creative staff. There are some things what we may be able to do on a lesser scale. As James said, we've already got some of the entertainment booked. We might be able to do some type of video type program where we are able to share that entertainment with people not having to leave their homes. I mean, we can try to get creative, but it's a lot of money to spend if we don't have very many people show up. In a sense, it's a sad thing because I was hoping by September, the end of September, it would be a celebration that people are able to get out and about again, and that's what James and I had talked about. Western Days is really important to our Old Town businesses. So I was hoping that that would be kind of a first step towards recovery, but it's very questionable. So with that, I'd like to have some direction from council.
So I have a couple of comments.
I'd love to have it for 1 day.
I'm sorry, Mayor?
Did anybody hear any of that?
No.
It was brilliant. I'm sorry I missed it. I would like to have it for 1 day and then be ready to cancel everything within May.
So my thoughts are these. First of all, if State Fair cancels, I guess you could look at it and go, what an opportunity. We can grab all their audience we can get. But frankly, if State Fair cancels, I think that's a message that we would be foolish to have our event. They've already pretty much told the public it's not safe. I'm opposed to a 1 day event. And I'll tell you why. It's very difficult to get vendors to come and unpack, set up, do a 1 day event, pack up, go home, and make it profitable. So we've learned that lesson years ago. Everybody around us has learned that lesson. 1 day events make it much harder to attract vendors. And So I would either go 2 days or just not do it at all. Looking at stage 2, total savings $6,500. 6,000 of that, almost 10%, is decor. If you're looking for places to trim, I think there's ways to go back to stage 1, 2, and 3 and possibly rebundle some of this and look at some cuts if we need to. I'm not saying that this isn't a good job putting these levels together. I'm just saying that I could go down, it's a little bit like a Chinese menu. I can go down through here and say, well, yeah, but what about this? What about, do I want to eliminate children's pony rides? You know, I don't know. I think participation in some of these items historically is going to be probably a decider for me. How well utilized are they? The Native American dancers, honestly, have been drawing bigger and bigger crowds. Sometimes you can't even get up close to see, and they cost $2,500. So, you know, that's an example to me of high participation and low cost. But back to where I started, State Fair cancels, I'd cancel. Go to a one-day event, you're gonna have trouble getting any good vendors. So, you know, it's either fish or cut bait.
Who's next?
Anyone else?
I agree. If the state fair cancels, then we're done. I'm kind of, I would need more time to think about this. 1 day, 2 day. I mean, you know, if you asked me a few months back, I'd be like, oh yeah, you know, go ahead and do it. But now we're kind of up in the air because we don't know where we're going to be later this month.
Yeah, given the fact, for me, given the fact that our COVID incident rate has not started to go down, I'm not sure that we're not going to be put under more stringent, you know, restrictions within the next couple of weeks again. I would be in favor of delaying the decision, though, for a couple of weeks, or at least until the next meeting, or maybe the first meeting in June.
Okay, Council, I'm going to push James, and I'm going to say we'll be back first meeting in June. I think what I read in the newspaper was they should be making a decision on the state fair by early June.
That
So hopefully
would be helpful too.
Yeah, we'll have that answer for you.
Is the June 1st, the first meeting in June, is the drop dead date?
That's when I'll target it, bring it back, Mayor. Hopefully I'll know what's going on with the state fair by that time.
Okay, so going to the second meeting in June would be too far, is that correct?
Sir?
Is going to the second meeting in June too far out?
I'm looking at James.
It's risky. There'd probably be a few savings we've identified we couldn't save, but the big items we probably could if we needed to. I'd be very hesitant, but we can always make things work.
So hopefully, it could be second meeting in June if I don't know about state fair. If it really does, we need to, if it really is based on whether the state fair, your decision is based on whether the state fair cancels or not, or doesn't cancel, then it may be second meeting in June. So I'll bring it back to you in June as soon as we hopefully know what the state fair is doing.
Let's look at the first meeting in June.
Okay.
Okay.
Just a quick comment, Donna, on State Fair, because I've worked with them on arts and crafts. There's so much stuff that already starts happening in May with the State Fair. They're going to have to make that decision very quickly.
And it's not just the state fair. It's also, as Bob said, you know, if our numbers of COVID increase, we need to take a look at that, because we may not need to wait for the state fair if we see it going the wrong way. But I just want to add.
Okay, thank you, Council. We'll go into utility fund now.
Okay, so I'll quickly go over the rest of the funds. We talked about the $149,000 revenue loss in the utility fund. We fully mitigated that. We've got salary savings there of over $300,000. We've put the covered parking project on hold, and we'll be able to free that up maybe by the end of the year if revenue continues as we think it will. And then the training and travel of $27,000. So we don't have to go into fund balance at all for that fund. The Internal Service Fund, again, these are the funds that get their revenue from transfers from our operating funds, like the General Fund, the Utility Fund. The Health Fund, the Insurance, and the Maintenance and Replacement, we've all reduced the transfers going into them from those operating funds, and the interest earnings have been reduced. But as you can see, in each of those cases, the fund balance is well enough to handle those reductions. So $5 million, $4.5 million, and $4.7 million on those fund balances.
I can tell you, we're really proud that we have a fund balance in the health fund, because for so many years, we had to borrow from the risk fund, because remember, the health fund is a trust. Once that money goes in, it can't come out. So we really had to live off of the risk fund balance. So it's been good that the council has regularly raised certainly the employer and employee rates, or we wouldn't be there, and some good experience.
So quickly, just some of the other funds that were impacted. The debt service is the same property tax issue. If we don't get those kind of trickling in payments between the 98% and the 100% of collections, we would lose $235,000. We did have a current revenue, though, balance when we adopted the budget of $481,000. So even if we don't get that $235,000, we are still fine and won't be going into fund balance.
So, Council, you might be wondering what we're going to do. You know, every year we plan to sell revenue debt and GO bonds. And so I've moved that decision out. Normally we sell in the spring, but we've been working with our financial advisor. We will be bringing an item to you at a future meeting, so we can discuss you potentially passing what's called a parameters agreement. So if the market does look like it is going to be good for municipal debt again, and we have the wherewithal, we could go on with those programs. The revenue debt, I see more likely, since the utility fund seems to be doing fairly well.
So then crime control and fire control, also we won't be eating into fund balance. The crime control, we were able to identify enough in savings. Fire control, we don't have quite enough in savings, but they did have a current balance where we didn't appropriate all of their revenue, so that covers that shortfall. Court security, technology, and truancy prevention are all related to the fines. They're all sourced, their revenue is all from fines and warrants. Well, not even warrants, just fines. And so those are dramatically impacted here. We couldn't cover all of the revenue loss. We covered as much as we could, and the rest can come out of their fund balances. The Community Activities Fund was one James just spent a great deal of time talking about. We do have a revenue shortfall there that will have to be covered by fund balance. And then in the 4B fund, that one, we actually did not budget all of the revenue that goes into the 4B fund. We had $1.7 million available there. So even though our revenue loss was $2 million, we do have fund expenditure savings of $500,000, and so that 1.5 falls under the balance that we had available of 1.7. So we won't be digging into fund balance. So that was all of the revenue and kind of losses and how we mitigated those. We do have kind of 3 housekeeping type appropriations that we do need to ask you for. One of them is in the general fund. We got in $30,500 more in tree mitigation funds than we had budgeted, and so that needs to be appropriated so that we can transfer it to our capital program. The asset forfeiture fund state, we tried to free up money in the crime control fund. We did have some purchases there that could be moved over to the asset forfeiture fund to free up some savings in crime control. But doing that made us need to budget that money in the asset forfeiture fund. And then CDBG, we only need to budget some prior year funding that we didn't have carried forward into the new budget year. The offsetting revenue will be added as well, so there's no impact to the overall fund for those 3 required supplements.
So, Council, next I mentioned earlier a retirement incentive program. So we have done this in the past. Back in 2008, we offered a retirement incentive program and had a number of employees that took that. This one is designed a little differently, just because of what's available to us in benefit design. So this is something, again, I would much rather have employees voluntarily leave, than have to take jobs. So we have over 70 employees that are on this list. HR will be meeting with each one of these employees individually to go through this program. And with that, I'll let Melinda walk you through the details.
So as Gina talked about the deficit in the general fund, what we know is 74% of the expenses in the general fund are personnel costs. So with that known factor, we could be looking at a reduction in authorized positions in the 2021 budget. So one option is to propose a retirement incentive. Even though we're looking at this incentive, we want you to know that we're continuing to analyze the loss of revenue, and we don't know how many of the 77 employees will take the incentive. So at the end of the day, there still may be a need for furlough or layoffs. This analysis has been independent of that. The program will be offered to the 77 employees. We will start meeting with employees tomorrow. We will be scheduling meetings every day for the next 2 weeks. If employees do not accept the program, if their position would be, that doesn't mean that their position is not protected from a future layoff decision. So when we talk about this retirement incentive, who is eligible? We looked at all civilian employees who have earned their full retirement benefit from the city based on their service time with the city. So who's not included? Well, basically any civilian employee who's not worked at the city for at least 10 years and is eligible for retirement is excluded. And then on public safety, our sworn police and fire positions, as you know, we have had an ongoing struggle to fill sworn police and fire positions. We're averaging about 20 vacancies between the two over the last couple of years. So we know as we move into the 2021 budget, we will not be laying off sworn police and sworn fire. Therefore, we've excluded them from this retirement incentive. So let's talk a little bit about what our City of Louisville retirement benefits are. So any employee who retires under TMRS, who meets their criteria, plus has 10 years with the City of Louisville, they receive $15,000 in life insurance at retirement. They also have the option to remain on our health plan until they turn 65 and become eligible for Medicare. While they're on our health plan as retirees, when they turn 65, we move them to the Medicare plan, or sometimes people retire and they're already age 65 or older, and they immediately go on to Medicare. And at that point, the city, we have a Medicare Supplement plan that's offered through ARP. It's a United Healthcare fully insured plan, and the city pays $50 a month of their premium as part of the retirement benefit. So before we talk about what our incentive is, I just wanted to do a quick review of how our health insurance works. Gina talked a little bit about the city health plan, but just as a reminder, it is self-funded. There's two sources of revenue that go into that fund. First of all, we budget $14,344 per authorized position. So wherever that position is budgeted, whether it's in the utility fund, general fund, 4B, that money is budgeted out of that fund. And then through the budget year, all of that money is then transferred into the health fund. The second way we get our revenue it comes from the employees who pay their own premiums for their own coverage and for their dependents' coverage. In addition to retirees who are on our health plan, their premiums also add to that fund. So that's our revenue. And then the only expenses, as Donna mentioned, that's a trust. So we are limited to what we can pay out of that expenses. It has to be related to health insurance and health benefits. So we pay all of the claims that come from all of our employees and retirees, and then all of the admin fees for that. So as Donna mentioned, we do have a $5 million fund balance. I don't remember a $5 million fund balance. I don't think it's ever happened since we started the trust back in the late 90s. So one reason for that is because we've consistently increased both the employer and the employee rates. The city, over the last 5 years, We've increased our own internal rate 42%, and the employee rates, it's varied based on what plan or tier, but overall it's been an average of 16%. And I didn't put on the slide, but I'll also add the retiree premiums over the last 5 years have increased 97%. They're driven by an actuarially calculated number that we have no control over, and that's really escalated over the last 5 years. Just as an example, currently this year, this is the premiums. We have 3 plans. This is our mid-plan. The premiums don't differ more than about $50 based on the 3. But as you can see, when an employee retires, if they've not worked for the city for 20 years, for their retiree-only coverage, it's about $1,200 a month. If they've had 20 years with the service, it's about $700 a month. 25 years, it's about $650 a month. So it's very expensive to continue your premiums. And as you look at this, you can think about that going up about 20% a year every year. So when we looked at what we wanted, what would be a good incentive, we looked at premiums. So our proposed incentive would provide anybody who retired and they're under age 65, we would waive their premium for 2 years. Again, that wouldn't cost us anything. It would just reduce the revenue that comes into the health fund. The retirees, our employees who are over 65, then what we would do is pay their ART premium for 2 years. So on average, it's about $200 a month. It does vary based on their age and where they live. We're already paying $50, so that would be an additional cost of $150 per month, but that also can come out of the, can be paid through the health fund. So the plan would be, as I mentioned, we would meet with all eligible employees, all 77 employees, over the next 2 weeks, and we would thoroughly review all of their benefits so that they know exactly what it looks like, spend time making sure they understood what the incentive is, making sure they understood what their benefits are, and then they would have until July 15th to think about it and accept it or reject it. If they accepted the program, they would have to retire prior to September 30th, 2020. So just to kind of look at what the potential financial impact would be to the health fund. As I mentioned, there's 77 employees. If all 77 of those employees took the incentive, which we know is not going to happen because it would take out the entire city manager's office, that would have an impact to the health fund, a loss of revenue of just over almost $760,000, and it would cost us in expenses just over $50,000 for the ART premiums. Realistically, we might get 20%, which would be 15 employees. That would result in about $151,000 lost revenue to the health fund, an expenditure of about $10,000 of ART premiums. It's kind of hard to tell you what the savings would be because the salaries vary, and it's hard to know which 20% of the employees might choose the benefit. But just to kind of give you an idea, every position that authorized position has $16,904 of fixed cost. That cost covers that health insurance we talked about, workers' comp, unemployment, and liability. In addition to that, there's 27.5% that's added on to every dollar of salary that covers the benefits for life insurance, accidental death and dismemberment, LTD, and retirement. So if you looked at someone whose salary was at $35,000 and they left, you would realize a savings for that position of just over $61,500. On the other end of that spectrum, if you had someone with an annual salary of $100,000 and we eliminated that position, you would have a savings of just over $144,000. So there is one other potential cost for accrued leave benefits, but it's going to happen regardless if they retire under this incentive or within the next couple of years. When employees terminate or retire, we're required to pay their accrued leave balances in accordance with city policy. Should we have 15% or 20% retire under this program, any of those accrued leave balances could be paid out of fund balance. So with that, I'll answer any questions you might have.
So council, this is on your consent agenda. It's item number 6. But if you have questions, it's probably a good time to talk about it now.
Any questions?
Okay.
Assuming nobody has any questions. Okay. Donna, you want to continue?
Yeah, so council, one thing that we've talked about is what we've seen when we've had other downturns in the economy is many times the feds will come back and they will provide funding for shovel-ready projects. And so we've gone through all of our capital projects and we've looked at what can we have ready if the federal government does come in to provide that type of stimulus money. And so right now we would have 9 projects we think ready within the next 6 months, street projects, 5 utility projects, 8 parks projects, and 1 facility project. So I think that puts us in a good position if the feds do come up with more money. So we'll be ready for that. And as I spoke about earlier, we will be reevaluating our bond program. We had planned for this year a GEO bond program of $12.7 million and a revenue package of $12.9 million. And so we have already, as I said earlier, been talking with our financial advisor. And initially when I talked to him, and that was probably a month ago, Jason said there's no municipal market at all. You can't sell debt at all. And so we are starting to see a comeback. And so Jason will be here the next meeting, I believe, to talk with you in more detail about what the market looks like and when he thinks we might be able to sell debt, and if we think our debt rate can support it. So that's where we are on the bond programs. And so the other thing, certainly, we've got a task force of employees that are looking at all the grants that are currently available. So there's the CARES Act. We are going to get additional money in CDBG to the tune a little over $500,000. We don't yet know what those specific rules are, but Claire and her team are looking at what the alternatives are, and we have that on next workshop to discuss with you in more detail. The remainder of the grants listed here are things that we're evaluating and hoping that we'll be able to apply for grants. James has been working on the lobbyist side to try to get some additional grants. So one thing, the big hole, the CARES grant or the CARES Act would actually reimburse us for specific COVID type costs that were not already part of the budget. So it's really limited on what we would qualify for. As Gina showed you and painted the picture very well, our real loss is in the revenue. So will there be help for the cities like they are given to private sector with the airlines and such? Will there be that same level of help for your cities and your states? So James and I have a conference call with Congressman Burgess's assistant, I think this week or next week, to talk about that in more detail. So council, with that is your unusually long mid-year report. Do I have any other questions?
Any questions?
Okay.
Okay, we'll move on. Now the regular session, City Secretary.
Public hearing number 1. Consideration of an ordinance granting a zone change request from Public Use District to Planned Development Estate Townhouse District with 8 associated variance requests on 24.120 acres located at the northeast corner of Windhaven Parkway and FM 544. The developer is proposing a 131 lot detached single-family planned development with 8 requested variances. A, to allow a 6-foot stained cedar fence with metal post and living screen when adjacent to LISD schools. B, to allow a 6-foot stained cedar fence with metal post and living screening along Windhaven Parkway in a portion of FM 544. C, to waive alley requirements and allow front entry for the residential development. D, to allow non-radial lot lines along street curvature. E, to provide visibility triangles at residential street intersections. F, to allow 5-foot utility easement along residential streets to be located on the right-of-way line with a 2-foot sidewalk easement along the frontage of the lot. And H, to allow the public water line to be located under street pavement. P&Z recommended approval by a vote of 7-0. The recommendation is that the City Council approve the ordinance and 8 associated variance requests as set forth in the caption above. Planning Director Richard Lukey is available to address any questions.
Are there any questions from the public?
Do we have any questions, please? No.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I'll do the roll call vote. Mayor Pro Tem Troyer,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson,
Aye.
Councilmember Gilmore,
Aye.
Councilmember Jones, Councilmember Jones,
I wonder if he's lost us.
It's
Randy,
my-
you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
I couldn't unmute. Yeah, aye.
okay, and Councilmember Green.
Aye.
And Mayor, actually, the motion was made by Mayor Pro Tem Troyer and seconded by Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson.
Okay. Yeah, we move to. You have a second. Counselor?
Oh, we need to make a motion to approve.
Sure. You're correct. You're correct.
Goodness.
Do I have a motion to approve?
Yeah, approve the ordinance and the 8 associated variances as set forth in the item.
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay. Counselor?
Ordinance of the Louisville City Council amending the zoning ordinance by rezoning an approximately 24.120 acre tract of land out of the BBB and CRR survey abstract number 180, J. Johnson survey abstract number 1609, and A. Singleton survey abstract number 1138, located at the northeast corner of Windhaven Parkway and Parker Road, from public use district zoning to planned development estate townhouse zoning, correcting the official zoning map, preserving all other portions of the zoning ordinance, determining that the public interest and general welfare demand the zoning change and amendment therein made, providing for repeal or severability of penalty and an effective date, and declaring an emergency.
Okay. City Secretary, call the vote.
Mayor Pro Tem Troyer,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson,
Aye.
Councilmember Gilmore,
Aye.
Councilmember Jones,
Aye.
Councilmember Green.
Aye.
And Mayor, I show the motion was made by Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson and seconded by Councilmember Jones.
Okay. And so the motion passed. Thank y'all. And Julie, those things are coming over here.
I know, terrible.
So,
Visitor,
go ahead.
Visitor Citizen Forum. Speakers must address their comments to the mayor rather than to individual council members or staff. Speakers should speak clearly into their device and state their name and address prior to beginning their remarks. Speakers will be allowed 5 minutes for testimony. Speakers making personal, impertinent, profane, or slanderous remarks may be removed from the meeting. Unauthorized remarks from the audience, stamping of feet, whistles, yells, clapping, and similar demonstrations will not be permitted. In accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, the City Council is restricted from discussing or taking action on items not listed on the agenda. Action can only be taken at a future meeting. And we have, Mayor, we have no speakers.
Okay, let's move on.
Consent agenda. All of the following items on the consent agenda are considered to be self-explanatory by the council and will be enacted with one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so requests. For a citizen to request removal of an item, an e-comments card must be filled out and submitted to the city secretary. Mayor, we've received no e-comments and we have no speakers either, and no speakers.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second.
Mayor Pro Tem Troyer,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson,
Aye.
Councilmember Gilmore,
Aye.
Councilmember Jones,
Aye.
Councilmember Green.
Aye.
And Mayor, I show that Councilmember Green made the motion and Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson seconded the motion.
Okay, and motion passes. Thank you.
Agenda item 9, consideration of a final plat with 3 associated variances on .172 acres located at the southwest corner of East Walter Street and Harris Street. The plat complies with all applicable city regulations except for the following 3 variance requests. A, to allow a reduced right-of-way dedication of 21 feet on Harris Street as shown in the exhibit. B, to allow a reduced width of a utility easement of 6.5 feet. And C, to allow understory trees on each residential lot. The recommendation is that the City Council approve the proposed final plat and 3 associated variances. We have Planning Director Richard Lutke and City Engineer David Salmon both available to address any questions.
Is there anyone else to speak?
And no one else to speak?
Okay.
We have no other speakers.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion second. Is there any discussion?
I have a question, probably for Richard or for David, I'm not sure. I had a question about the, are we allowing parking in those driveways in the front?
No, there will
A
not
car's
be.
not gonna fit there, right?
Correct. There will not be room for a car to park in front of the garage door. They'll have to enter into the garage.
Okay. Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there any other questions? Okay, City Secretary, call the vote.
Mayor Pro Tem Troyer,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson,
Aye.
Councilmember Gilmore,
Aye.
Councilmember Jones,
Aye.
Councilmember Green.
Aye.
And I show Councilmember Gilmore made the motion and Councilmember Jones seconded the motion.
And motion passed unanimously. Item 10.
Consideration of a resolution extending the declaration of local disaster for public health emergency until 11:59 p.m. on May 18th, 2020. Ongoing evaluation of circumstances related to the virus and the updated recommendations of the Centers for Disease Control and the Texas Department of State Health Services indicate that the conditions necessitating the disaster declaration have and will continue to exist for a period extending beyond May 4th, 2020. The recommendation is that the City Council consider the resolution as set forth in the caption.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Can I ask which council member made that motion?
I said so
I did
moved.
first, but
Okay.
Did you get the second?
Yeah, and Councilman Troyer seconded that motion?
I will second it, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is there any discussion? Okay, City Secretary, call the vote.
Mayor Pro Tem Troyer,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson,
Aye.
Councilmember Gilmore,
Aye.
Councilmember Jones,
Aye.
Councilmember Green.
Aye.
Okay, motion passed unanimously. Now we're down to reports. City Manager?
So Mayor and Council, I wanted to give you an update on all of our COVID dealings. And so one thing I wanted to let you know, so I've noticed a lot of our surrounding cities are starting to set dates for when they're going to reopen certain activities. We have chosen not to do that because to me there's still a lot of things that are unknown. I can't tell you that I'm going to open the senior center in June or that I'm going to be able to open the pools in June. So I'd rather not set those dates until I have more direction. So Governor Abbott will be given more direction and making decisions on the reopening. He's now set that, James tells me, for Tuesday. So we'll be getting more direction. So I just wanted you to know we are starting to get questions. In relation to the senior center, what we've shared is that we have extended our agreement to operate the senior center at the mall if we are able to operate a senior center prior to the opening of Thrive. So I will tell you, if the governor allows it and Judge Eads allows it, we will try to be operational again. But we really are under certainly the control of the other levels of government related to this situation. So with that said, we are continuing to operate our call center. We operate 5 days a week now. We were operating 7 days a week. We're still getting a number of calls, less and less calls. Every time a new decision comes through, though, the number of calls bumps up. So today we've handled over 4,000 calls going through this call center. So I think it has been a very good service to the public. Our Division of Emergency Management has been extremely busy, as you might guess, dealing with all of the issues related to COVID and all the storms. Poor Tom one day had him on several task forces, and I found out he hadn't even gone to bed the night before because he'd been monitoring storms. So it is a small operation with just 2 employees, and so they've been gravely impacted. So he is heading our task force, he and Melinda, related to the reopening. We've been meeting with each one of our departments, and we're coming up with a plan on how to reopen. Once we have, as I said, direction from the governor, we'll make specific decisions on that, and that will certainly be presented to the City Council. We are working, there is going to be a COVID-19 drive-through testing site that's going to be held here in Louisville on Friday, May 8th at the mall from 8 a.m. to noon. So there's additional information about that on our website. We are continuing to assist the overall enforcement task force, educating businesses. It is confusing as the reopening rules are shared by the governor's office. There's a lot of confusion, and we start getting all the calls. So we've worked through James and certainly Tom and this group to interpret it and share that information with businesses as best we can. We're also, as I said earlier, looking for any federal grants that we can to help with this situation. Jason Moore has done a tremendous job getting out and educating himself on the grants and loans available to private businesses, and he's been working with those private businesses to try to get them the assistance they need. The library is the one area where we have started a reopening. So we actually allowed, starting May 1st, materials to be returned. So we had lots of material checked out when we closed down. 18,000 items have been checked out. So Carolyn wanted to first allow people to return those items prior to allowing more to be checked out. So starting May 8th, patrons can reserve materials online, and then they can pick them up at our drive-through window. Staff will also be on site answering questions. The library itself will not be open to the public until we get further direction. Hours of service will be Wednesday through Thursday, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m., and Friday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. The police department, we are now back to what I would call much more normal operations. If you remember, we moved a lot of our officers from special ops to patrol to make sure we had the coverage that we needed. We have now put those officers back into those specialty roles. And so Gina talked a lot about traffic and warrants. So Everybody needs to make sure they're driving the speed limit and stopping at red lights and such, because we are out doing normal traffic enforcement now. It's interesting, over the last 2 weeks, we have responded to 30 violations of the emergency declaration. 10 were for businesses and 20 were personal violations. We did not issue any citations. We did try to handle things without writing that ticket. As I've told you on each of our reports, I'm very proud of our fire inspectors. They've played a special role, different from what they normally do. They have been the enforcement arm of this COVID operation out in the field. James has been in the office and they've been in the field. And so they've had some interesting situations. They've had over 759 courtesy contacts where they're going out and they're trying to educate business owners on the mandates. And then we also respond to complaint contacts, over 33 complaint contracts or contacts. So this has been a challenging issue. You know, most people have been really good and understand that it's all for the public health. We have had some naughty businesses also that have not done that. But anyway, so we continue with enforcement. HR, as we said earlier, all of our non-essential positions are frozen. We are now recruiting police and fire. Something that council may be particularly interested in is your Youth Action Council. Unfortunately, they were about to, they had their park project where they were designing a park, and we were going to have an event in this park that they designed, but unfortunately COVID hit, so we didn't get to do that activity. But we would like an opportunity to have the kids, at least in a Zoom meeting, to speak to the council about what they learned through the Youth Action Program, and be able to give you some FaceTime with the kids. And we're going to try to do that at the next meeting. We're working through exactly what that's going to look like, but hopefully the next meeting. Development services, you have a team that some are still working at home. As I said, City Hall's not reopened. None of our facilities are reopened. I have a number of staff members that are able to function quite well from home. So our sustainability manager is hard at work on our rewrite of the sustainability plan. That will be at a future council workshop, I hope, in the next 2 to 3 workshops. Old Town Sprinkler Program, that new sprinkler system that we've been working on for over 5 years, is still underway. There have been some delays related to COVID and trying to work with the businesses as they have to alter their operations. Neighborhood services, loving our community outreach program. Those were the group of employees that were doing call outs to our seniors and then people who lived in rental properties and such. That program has continued, but really it was moved into the main call center. So we're still reaching out to help as many people as possible. We have a lot of our social service agencies that have been able to help us follow up with the needs of the community that have been identified through this process. The staff and our neighborhood grants are working, they're looking at CDBG grant I mentioned earlier. We're going to get an additional grant over $500,000, and we'll be deciding how that will be used and making recommendations to the council at the next meeting. Operations in neighborhood and inspection services are continuing. Animal services is continuing. I'm still so happy that we have been able to adopt a lot of animals. Claire, I don't think we still have any cats. We just have 10 dogs. It's just amazing. So that's been a great program, and so happy that we avoided that issue. In finance, most of our operations are continuing. A lot of people, again, still working from home. For utility bills, you have not continued to do cutoffs. There are currently 780 delinquent utility accounts that owe us a total of $125,036. That's about 3.3% of all utility accounts. Purchasing, accounts payable, and accounting internal audit are all working from home and continuing. I can assure you that bills are getting paid. Purchasing, where we can purchase, that's still occurring. Engineering, capital projects, I talked again with David today. All those projects that had already started, they're all moving forward and they're on target. In case you get any questions about Main and Mill, we are still planning to complete that project in early October. Economic development, I mentioned to you earlier that I think Jason's done just a fabulous job reaching out and working with the businesses in our community along with the chamber. He has educated himself on the various grants available, the Paycheck Protection Program and others, and is trying to make sure he's connecting those businesses with those sources. Planning, still working remotely, still having a development review. It's interesting because Jason will tell you all the projects that were already underway, the development projects, are continuing. Like the Main and Mill loss, we think that we've set a close date on the sale of the old K&W site for June 3rd. Projects moving forward. But when you start looking at projects that had not started, so those seem to be slowing. So we still are having our development review committee meetings remotely, but not quite as many projects on the agenda. Public services, streets and traffic, drainage, utility line maintenance, they have resumed preventative maintenance and emergency response. Certainly our water and wastewater plants are still fully operational, fleet services as well as facilities. Parks and Recreation, Leela is back open to the public, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Disc golf is open, but I think the baskets are still not there, and we have those same limitations that the golf courses do. We have reopened some of our restrooms, and again, as I said earlier, we're pending decisions about our pools and our senior activity center until later, until we have more direction. Fred Herring will not be reopening. That is a plan that has a savings cut that is paid for through your 4B fund, and we are not reopening it at this point. So, Council, with that, that is our COVID update.
Everyone should have received their first quarter boards and commissions and committees attendance report. If there's any questions on that, get with you tomorrow, Julie. Now we'll go to staff reports. Anybody have anything? Speak up.
Do you have a raised hand?
Who's who? Are there any? It's Rudy. Okay, so none? Okay. Now we're down to the council reports. Councilmember Green?
I just wanted to say really briefly that this has been a lot of stuff that we've gone over tonight, and I just wanted to say thank you to the staff for, I realize this is just the tip of the iceberg of what you guys have been dealing with for the last 2 months. So I appreciate all the hard work you're doing. I'm, like Neil has said the last couple of times, I'm very proud to be in Lewisville right now. I think we've made a lot of really great decisions over the years that are really positioning us well to face what we're facing right now. And so I'm very grateful for all of that. And I also just wanted to mention also very briefly is that the census is actually still going on. And I think the number I heard was a little over 50% of Lewisville response rate right now. So if you have not responded to the census yet, if you lost your letter, you can still go online to 2020census.gov and you can just fill it out right there. Super easy to do.
Okay,
that's all I had.
Okay. Councilmember Jones?
Yes, I just want to remind everybody to, although we're starting to open back up, the numbers aren't really where we want them to be as far as cases just yet. Hopefully we're not going a little bit sooner than we should. So people should still take precautions when they're going out. I think they need to make sure you still pay attention to the county health website to watch those numbers. Maybe wear a mask, wash your hands still. We're not out of the woods yet, but those things will help us. And I want to send a shout out not only to our staff, but also to our county officials. Judge Eads has done a great job over the past few months trying to, make sure that the county is safe, and he's been working very diligently. And the county health officials and the information that they're giving us on the website has been really good. So please use those websites. Go there, go to CDC. Don't go to Facebook. Listening to the Facebook experts, go to the real experts.
Thank you. Councilmember Gilmore?
Ditto. And that's all I've got.
Okay, thank you. City manager, do you want to add anything else here?
I think
Still
Councilman
going down the
Troyer,
dais, so. Okay.
Councilman Troyer, I think you got skipped. I'm sorry. I didn't want to take your spot.
No. Do you have anything?
No, sir, I don't.
Okay. Councilmember Troyer?
I just want to add my kudos to the staff and for everything that's been done, and echo what Councilman Jones said about we're not out of the woods, and the numbers, to me, the numbers are not looking good. So just keep keep paying attention to what's going on. And that's it.
Thank you. Councilmember Ferguson?
Yeah, I almost thought I was getting skipped. I want to reiterate something I think we've probably said, but I see it, I guess, in spades tonight. And that's a statement to the quality and intelligence of the staff that we have. A lot of cities are going through what I would definitely call shock and awe, trying to figure this mess out. And then I look at the depth of the analysis and the thoughtfulness and planning, and look at that over time, the history of it, and how it's brought us where we are now. And even though there's things we don't know and can't know yet, I just feel like we've got a real grasp on how to respond. And again, like right now, I'd hate to be Arlington or Grapevine. I mean, these guys are trying to figure out how to swim and not drown. But I'm just so proud personally to be supported by this staff. I think they do a phenomenal job, and even just the dedication to persevere through this mess. You make me proud of the city. And yes, I've said it before, and I'll keep saying it. At this time, I can't think of any place I'd rather be than right here in Lewisville, and the staff is a huge part of that. So thank you to everyone who works so hard. You make us look good.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Pro Tem. I just have one statement. This too shall pass. So that's all I have. And with that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adjourn, and happy May the 4th be with you.
Yes, thank you.
Second.
Wait a second. Okay, all those in, we're going to call the vote on that.
Mayor Pro Tem Troyer?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson?
Aye.
Councilmember Gilmore?
Aye.
Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Councilmember Green?
Aye.
Mayor, I show Councilmember Jones made the motion and Councilmember Green seconded the motion.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.